The ancient Egyptians believed in a layered reality, where a massive underworld full of gods and monsters was just as real as the physical world, and souls had to navigate it to reach the afterlife. The Sumerians saw the heavens, earth, and underworld as separate realms that could overlap, with gods and mortals crossing between them. And the Vedic tradition believed there were multiple realms, each with its own rules, beings, and time. These are ancient civilizations that knew parallel universes exist. The ancient Egyptians had one of the most elaborate ideas about the afterlife and the structure of reality itself. I mean, they may have not talked about parallel universes in a scientific way, but they did believe in these different layers of existence. One of the most important was the Duat, often called the underworld, a realm of gods, gates, and monsters. Souls had to pass through it to reach the afterlife, and the journey wasn't symbolic. The Egyptians believed that this realm was just as real as the physical one. They also believed the soul had multiple parts, Ka, Ba, etc., and that each part could interact with different planes of existence. The gods themselves traveled freely between these realms. Rituals, spells like the ones in the Book of the Dead, and architecture like the pyramids and tombs were designed to help souls move between these realities. So they didn't see reality as only what was in front of their eyes. They believed there were layers to it. So in that sense, their entire belief system was built around the idea that multiple dimensions or realms existed and could be crossed under the right conditions. The Sumerians were one of the first civilizations to write things down, and their myths are full of ideas that sound like alternate realms. They believed in three primary layers: the heavens, the earth, and the underworld, called Kur. These were seen as real planes of existence that affected your daily life. The gods lived in the heavens, humans lived on Earth, of course, and the dead went to Kur down below. And much like a multiverse concept, these realms could sometimes overlap. In stories like the Descent of Inan, the goddess Inanna travels to the underworld, dies, and then comes back. So they had this idea that entities could move between dimensions. The underworld was also not necessarily evil here, it was just another realm, operating under different rules. In fact, a lot of rituals were focused on keeping the borders between these realms stable, so that chaos wouldn't spill over. But controlled contact was still seen as possible. That's why they built ziggurats as stairways to the gods, not to merge the realms completely, but to create this stable link between heaven and earth. In ancient Indian texts, especially from the Vedic and later Hindu traditions, there is a really detailed breakdown of the universe. Not just one world, but many. They believed in multiple lokas or realms, each with its own purpose and beings. There's Svarga, which is kind of like heaven, Baloka, the earthly realm where we live, and Patala, the underworld. But that's just scratching the surface here, because some texts list 14 worlds, 7 higher and 7 lower, where gods, demons, spirits, and humans all live their lives in different layers of reality. These weren't vague ideas about the afterlife, they were very specific. Each realm was thought to have its own laws, its own beings, and even time was believed to work differently in each one. This weirdly lines up pretty well with modern ideas about how time could flow in alternate dimensions. So while they weren't using the type of language we use with parallel universes today, the Vedic did believe that there were many different realities stacked above and below our own. Same with the ancient Maya. They believed there were multiple levels stacked on top of and beneath the physical world. 13 layers of heaven and 9 layers of the underworld, all connected by something called the world tree. The human world sat in the middle between these layers, and everything was connected. The heavens weren't just above the clouds, and the underworld wasn't just underground. These were entire realms, each ruled by different gods and filled with spirits. What makes the Maya unique is how they tied all of this into their daily lives. Their temples and pyramids were built to mirror how they thought the universe was laid out. A step pyramid like the one at Chichen Itza was basically a map of the cosmos, showing the layers of heaven, earth, and the underworld stacked on top of each other. Even the ball game they played was connected to this. In some stories, the game represented a battle between life and death, or this struggle between this world and the next. Rituals, sacrifices, and ceremonies were also meant to keep these realms in balance. And now, ancient Greek mythology. A lot of us read about these stories in school about all the gods, heroes, and creatures that would travel between different realms. Of course, you have the underworld, ruled by Hades, where the dead went, considered to be a separate realm that could also be entered by the living at times. Heroes like Heracles or Hercules journeyed there and came back. They also had the Olympian realm, placed high up on Mount Olympus, where the gods resided. And they also believed in the world of dreams, and other places like the fields of Elysium, where the righteous souls went after death. These were all considered real places, not just metaphors. For Greeks, they were woven into the fabric of life. It's really incredible. All these different cultures from opposite sides of the globe had very similar ideas about the nature of reality, or realities, should I say. In Norse mythology, the cosmos was divided into 9 realms. These realms were connected by Yggdrasil, the world tree, and each realm had its own unique characteristics, creatures, and gods. There was Asgard, the realm of the gods, Midgard, the human world, which is pretty mid, as the Gen Zers would say, and Vanheim, the world of the Vanir gods, who were these gods of nature, fertility, and the prosperity. And then you had Niflheim, the icy underworld, because every civilization needed their own crummy place down below. There are countless stories of Odin and other gods crossing into different realms, either to interact with other beings or to battle the forces of chaos. The idea that there were multiple worlds in existence was fundamental to the Norse. They believed that these realms were real and that crossing between them was possible, especially for the gods and heroes, and of course if you die. The Norse even had their own doomsday prophecy, Ragnarok, where all the realms would clash and be reborn. Ancient Chinese philosophy was built around the idea of multiple realms and planes of existence. In Taoism, for example, they believed in a balance between the physical world, the spiritual world, and other realms. These were places where deities, immortals, and spirits lived and interacted with humans. One key idea was qi, or life force, which flows between all the realms. Definitely a big inspiration for the Force in Star Wars. Buddhism in China had its own version of parallel worlds with different levels of existence, like Pure Land, where enlightened beings live. The belief was, and still is, that different realms exist in layers. They could influence the living if you know how to connect with them. For the Aboriginal Australians, one of the most ancient civilizations on Earth, Dreamtime is the foundation for how the world was formed and how it still works. It's a whole framework that explains how the land, the animals, and social rules came to be. The ancestors who created everything weren't gods in the usual sense. They were powerful beings who moved through the land, shaping it as they went. Their paths, called song lines, are still followed today through stories, chants, and ceremonies. And these song lines don't just describe a journey, they're believed to hold the journey. By performing the stories in the right place at the right time, people could reconnect with that original power, as if past and present were overlapping. So this Dreamtime isn't described necessarily as back then, it's kinda always there, you just can't always see it. Some groups also describe shifts in awareness or reality during these rituals where the boundaries blur and the world seems to fold. It's not framed in terms of physics, but it does hint at the same ideas, multiple states of existence stacked or side by side, and ways to move between them. The Inca saw reality as divided into 3 main layers: Hanapacha, the upper world; Kayapacha, K-Pacha, the human world; and Ukupacha, the inner or underworld. Hope I'm pronouncing those correctly. Certain caves, springs, and mountaintops were believed to be access points. A cave could be a doorway into Ukupacha, for example, or a mountaintop might connect to Hananpacha. Each location had a specific role and was tied to one of these realms. They used the Chicana or Andean cross to represent how these worlds connected. It was sort of like a map in a way. Its shape and appears in architecture, textiles, and city layouts. It helped to guide how temples were built, how these solstices were marked, and where important rituals would take place. And you had a living person who was believed to move between these realms, the Inca ruler. Even agricultural rituals were tied to these beliefs. Seeds buried in the ground were thought to pass through Ukupacha before rising again. So you could say these beliefs were deeply ingrained? For the Celts, the otherworld was a realm where gods, spirits, and the dead existed. It was seen as a place that existed alongside our own. The Celts believed the otherworld had its own rules, landscapes, its own beings. Certain locations on Earth, like caves and lakes and burial mounds, were believed to be portals where the living could pass into this realm. And special times like Samhain, the early version of Halloween, these were seen as moments where the barrier between the worlds was at its thinnest, allowing easier passage for spirits to enter and exit. The Druids, as spiritual leaders, were thought to be able to journey into the other world through rituals and altered states of consciousness. In some stories, people, including warriors, were said to enter the other world, live out their entire lives there, and return as if no time had passed. With all that said, I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.